What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Founders Lounge with the founder and CEO of Upwell, Charley Dehoney. The conversation is absolutely phenomenal, but I did have to get it on your radar. We did run into some slight audio difficulty, but the content is there. The conversation is phenomenal. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Well, I can go ahead and kick us off. And Charley, I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the first times I met you, and I think it will just kind of resonate with why we want you on this and just all the amazing things that you've done. But I got introduced to you at a TIA event once, and right off the bat, and I feel like this is how you are with a lot of people, you felt like you just knew me forever. Automatically embraced me, automatically were just really welcoming into the conversation. And every single time ever since then, you've always dapped me up, given me a big hug at these conferences. And I think that's kind of what you exude within the industry, and people gravitate towards that, which I think then goes well into the startup that you're doing now and some of the other entrepreneurial things that you've done. And we're excited to dig a little bit more into it. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for not making something that I did at conference embarrassing.
Yeah,
that's actually
totally good.
Flattering. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. Thank you for flying to see Cohen and I here in the studio of the Founders Lounge. I think I've known you 17 years, so excited to come in and talk about your story as an entrepreneur and what you've done the last 15, 20 years of your career.
I'm excited too. I'm happy to come down and spend some time with you guys. That worked.
Well, I don't know if we want to start like where maybe, is it fourth generation salesperson? Is that right? Is that kind of the background?
Yeah, I mean, I guess growing up, my dad would always tell me that I was going to be in sales. My dad was in sales. He sold meat my whole life. And I always felt like I was better than that, and I was going to do something else. And, I thought I was going to be a business owner. And my dad always encouraged me to study business and get close to finance and understand how the money works. But he always told me I was going to sell, and I never believed him. And then, and in the college years, I had the opportunity to play football, and about midway through, I decided to restart. I started at Idaho State. I didn't really care for living that far away from home, and I wanted to get back to California to be near my now wife in those days, but landed at San Jose State after going back to junior college and getting a ton of offers. But San Jose State at that time was the mecca of the Silicon Valley. And in the year 2000, going and playing a couple of years of ball up there and then kind of landing in a venture-backed company sounded like a good deal. Well, I moved there in 2000 when everything was hot, and I left in 03 when everything was done. So like every other schmuck, I just had to go get a sales job. And I thought sales would be my best path into entrepreneurship. And I interviewed with 31 companies. If they had an entry-level B2B sales training program from payroll to postage meters to wine, I interviewed with them. I went on the field ride. I cold called with the copier guys, and I ended up having to land in overnight shipping. And it was really, looking back, it was a culture thing. The guy that interviewed me at Worldwide Express was a guy named Ryan Venturine. He went on to become a franchisee in the Worldwide Network, and he had just moved out to Sacramento from Minneapolis. He played college football at the University of Minnesota. He was driving a Lincoln Town car and wearing a suit. And I thought, wow, I want to be like this guy in a couple of years. And that's what Worldwide did, is it created this path for you mentally. From the very first interview, you could see how you were going to potentially make $100,000. And so that was really what kind of got me into logistics. And then once I saw logistics, I could never unsee logistics.
It's that way. It's true. When I was coming up, fastest path, $100,000 was sales.
That's right.
Sales careers all. But then you kind of see you want more. You see how the org works, finance and everything else. And the entrepreneur journey kind of gets in your mind about that.
Yeah. And taking a step back, so when you were talking about sales was going to be the path to entrepreneurship, your dad was in meat sales. How did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? I feel like that's such an interesting thing, especially with a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there. It's your brain is almost wired a little bit differently. Was there something that just really stood out and like, this is exactly what I want to get into?
I think there's a lot of people that craft their entrepreneur sort of connection to their children or to their childhood, maybe a little bit more clearly and acutely than I do. Looking back, I always remember worrying about money from a very young age, thinking about money and financial independence as being more of a choice than like an affliction. My parents were great people, but they did not prioritize earning money. And I remember asking my dad at a very young age, like, Dad, where am I going to go to college? I was probably 4 years old. And he laughed at me. He was like, you better get a scholarship. And so I knew from a young age, like I needed to compete and I needed to pave my own path. I also knew that traditional jobs never resonated with me. like, I was always down to babysit. I was always down to umpire. I was always down to do these transactional things that would allow me to kind of have my nights and weekends available when I wanted to. I was not going to go work at a grocery store, fast food, working at a fast food place like made my skin crawl. I felt sorry for my friends that would take those jobs because I was always able to go find a better way to make money. I could generally get paid more doing something else that I liked. And then I would say that when I got to high school, the best gift I think my parents ever gave us was my dad really buckled down like in my middle school, high school years and got a fantastic job in San Diego selling meat.
Yeah.
We moved to a good school in a really nice area for the very first time. And my parents rented the cheapest house in this area to get us into this high school. But that's where I started going over to my friend's house and seeing how doctors and attorneys and entrepreneurs lived. And I was like, holy shit, this is it. And I saw, these were intentional choices that these people made throughout their life that compounded into a fantastic life for them and their children. And I had the opportunity to start, working towards that at a younger age. So I think, all things considered, I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to build wealth, and I knew I didn't want to work in the traditional path. And don't get me wrong, there's been several times in my career where I've, gone back to being an employee after doing something very entrepreneurial. Maybe that happens again, but I think one thing being an entrepreneur does is it allows you to think more broadly about the projects that you pick, and it allows you to decouple your own personal identity from the role that you're in at the time.
Yeah. I mean, you grow up hardworking family, but then you get to see what's on the other side of the tracks, what other people are doing, what decisions they made every single day to get where they are.
Yeah, I'm not alone in that. I mean, the Jet, our mutual friend Jet, talks a lot about, wanting Jordans and that motivating him.
Oh, for me, I can only, all I ever got was Spankies. And so I'd work on the side hustle, baseball cards, sell coins, do whatever I could do to try to get some Nikes.
That was the same. And I think it didn't always land with my family either. I think there was a little bit of a resentment from my parents sometimes and my brothers and sisters. I was in the middle of 5. So typical middle child, always felt like I was getting the short end of the stick, but I was always willing to, go do something else, go ask somebody for something, go get outside my comfort zone to go get a better pair of shoes because the Pro Wings from Payless were embarrassing to me. And when I would show shame and embarrassment about that, it would bother my family oftentimes. And now as a parent, I understand that feeling. You want to provide everything for your children that you possibly can. And so that's probably difficult to deal with, in those days, but it's just how I was.
When you were younger, do you have any ideas in high school to start a business? Because the reason I'm asking you is my father was like, no matter what I brought up, he'd find a reason why it wouldn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I started, mowing lawns and stuff like that, but your typical stuff. But
yeah.
the first, kind of company I tried to start was hanging Christmas lights long before it was, this was like back in the late 90s. And I remember getting buddies together and we did a couple of houses and we made a little bit of money just hanging up other people's Christmas lights. And then I remember talking to one of my best friends about it. And he shared the idea with a buddy of his on campus at University of Arkansas. And that kid just scaled that idea. And I remember thinking in the back half of college, damn, the idea is nothing. It's all about execution. Because while I was sitting there finishing my last couple of years of football, this guy was building an empire and building a supply chain in China.
Yeah.
Bringing his own lights. So, I think you get glimpses of execution along the way. I think I always go back to Jet when I think about execution in my role at Upwell right now and how he really built a playbook for Freight Tech around being in every event, building partnerships with every TMS, having the integrations being your channel sales partnership. I think there's a lot of people that have taken Jet's playbook and built nice businesses in the similar fashion. So I think, that's one thing that if you're a student of the game, you're learning everywhere along the way. So that first business that you try to start, when somebody else shuts it down and they got to see somebody else do it, you're like,
yeah. Interesting. So then now fast forwarding again to when you were talking about your time over at Worldwide Express, that was your introduction to the industry. And you said that the culture is what kind of drew you in. What was that experience like?
The time at Worldwide Express was just pure magical. And I know that there's a lot of people that are going to think I'm a sadist or maniacal for saying this, but it just landed with me. When you get out of playing sports in my generation, as somebody who was born in 1979, graduated high school in 1998, and then finished my last year of college in 2002, there was an intensity around sports in those days. And there was a sort of intensity that came from your coaching staff and the rigor of your schedule. And that agreed with me. Going through college and having a reason to be there and having somebody to wake me up, or having a reason to wake up in the morning and get some shit done and then get to school and then come back and like keep on campus all day. If I didn't have that, there was a lot of other things that could have gotten me off campus. So coming out of school, I really felt like I needed a culture. I needed a program. I needed a sales manager to ask me how my day went and call me out when I gave them fluff numbers. So I got to Worldwide and, they said, look, like, it was a brand new franchise in Sacramento, just starting off. Like, we didn't have a Dell computer plugged in yet. It was just an office and a couple of desks. And he's like, hey, man, there's 60,000 small businesses in Sacramento. I'm going to hire 2 reps. So I did the math on that. I was like, that's a lot of cold calls. Like, that's a lot of green field. And I had gone on all these other field rides with copier sales reps that were going to get high. Like, as soon as they get out of the sales meeting, they'd go play mad and it'd get high. And I was sitting there with like panic attacks on the field ride going like, dude, the sales manager's going to know we got to get out of here. Oh, it's fine, So I didn't want that. I knew I wanted to be successful. I didn't know what success looked like, but I knew that Worldwide created a path. So from day 0, you're in the office, you're learning the script. I could still spout the script off the top of my head on cold call, the presentation. But I really embraced that stuff because they had little prizes along the way to let you know that you were doing okay and to show you and the rest of your peers that you were progressing. So it started with going to Worldwide Express basic sales training in Dallas, Texas. We were there for a week. There was over 60 other people. A lot of people that were in that training program are still massive parts of Worldwide Express, including Mike Grayson, the executive vice president, like a guy, the face of the company, Tom Medine, the CEO in those days, would come in and parachute in and run your ACE training for advanced concepts and excellence for your top performers. So when you got to go out to Dallas and David Kiger, the founder, and Roger McDonald, the co-founder, knew your name and they came and watched your role play, like you knew that you were doing something special. And then if you had the top role play, you'd win a pen, a Montblanc pen, and you get $1,000. So I'm the kind of guy, and I'm still like this, and I need to curb my risk as I get older. But, I was the guy that went out and maxed out my now wife's credit card on a suit because I wanted to dress for success and have a suit that was above my pay grade. So I was going to go out there and win that pen. Now I got second in the competition, so I didn't get the $1,000. And I still had the credit card debt, but the suit helped.
Yeah, I was saying a nice suit at least.
And I didn't get off to the best start there. I mean, it was 6-7 weeks before I got my first sale. And we had an office in Phoenix at the time that was just crushing it. And a couple of guys that I had gone to basic sales training with had this manager that was just piling sales on their numbers. So these guys got off to a super fast start. I was out there doing it by myself the hard way. Pretty sure my manager was out with the other rep more than me. She was female. I wasn't. They lived in the same apartment building. I'm not saying that there was anything going on there. I'm just saying I didn't get much support on my cold calling. Literally. But I remember when I finally got my first couple of deals, I was like, oh, wow, I know how to do this now. And then I became the top guy after about 6 months. I won the national sales contest in the month of December. And I got promoted to manager about month 6.5. I was hiring guys older than me. My manager moved on. He went and bought his own franchise. And so, you would see this kind of path of stair stepping to advancing. And that's really what kind of got me hooked. And I worked my way up the corporate ladder and really got some great opportunities there. Got equity roles, very early in my career. Super thankful I got the opportunity.
So you're selling mainly small packages, check.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the first 6 years I was there, it was all first Airborne Express, and then they got acquired at DHL. Thank God, because Airborne Express was fundamentally the worst service provider Rudy has ever seen, statistically. Now, I met some great humans in the ABX world, and I still know some great people inside of DHL. When you get these big companies, these big logistics companies, and you see the inside of those workings, it's amazing. Anything gets delivered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to go door to door, with like a little leather folder, walk in. Hi, my name's Charlie. I'm with Worldwide Express. We're an authorized selling partner of Airborne Express. I'd like to introduce myself to the owner. Who would that be? And then you'd look at your watch and you look away. Just anything you could do to be disingenuous to that person at the front desk and just try to get them to move and get the owner back. So it was a real condescending kind of model. I think it kind of set me back emotionally for many years about my ability to deal with other people, because you just learn how to be a bulldog. 50, 60 doors a day you're walking into.
It's interesting that you say that, and I think that I attribute a lot to my great experience that I had at C.H. Robinson in Chicago Central for the training model, and then learning from a bunch of really phenomenal people in the industry. But when you were just talking about that right there, I even remember in our old office over here at Lakewood, this is probably when I first started on the Talent Solvers team. There was two guys that walked in. I don't know if you remember this or not, but they knocked on the door, and I'm like, who's coming to our house? It was literally two people from Worldwide Express that came in and almost said that exact same thing to me. And I'm like, oh, this is who you need to talk to right here. But I think it probably just goes to show the success that you can have of doing something a little bit more quote unquote old school as opposed to hiding behind an email or just traditional cold calls.
Yeah, I mean, my little brother has a Unishipper franchise now. Unishipper's owned by the Worldwide Express Group, and he's still out there knocking on doors and it's still working. It's a lost art. It's something that I think for those of us old school guys that used to go do that, like we miss it. There's not enough of this. There's not enough of just getting in a room and having a good conversation. And I got the chance last week to go down to Urbandale, Iowa, and sit down with the top 100 broker, and room was filled. The energy comes from that, the takeaways, the commitments. It's just it's lost. But the days at Worldwide Express of really having to pitch, because now like I've got SDRs in the office and they're making 150, 200 dials a day on auto dialer, and they're aiming for 9 to 15 connects, right? Well, we make like 50, 60 in-person calls per day. Yeah. And we were looking to get 5 to 6 business owners out. And if you could pitch 5 to 6, you should get a meeting or two out in the field. Sometimes you get the cold call close. That was the holy grail when the guy just signs up right there. But yeah, selling small pack was easy, man. Because after you walk in, if that person would go get the owner, you'd say, "Hey, look, Coleman, I realize I'm here on the announce, but my name's Charley Dehoney with Worldwide Express. We're Airborne's largest partner. We handle the small business market. There's a brand new program in the area. I was just across the street with the athletic club. Want to pop in here, introduce myself. You guys qualify for the program. Curious, do you guys do any Federal Express or UPS shipping on a daily basis?" "Yeah, we're a daily UPS user." "Oh, awesome. Man, if you have 15 minutes and a bill you could pull, I could sit down and give you a better idea of what we could do for you right now. You got a place where you can sit?" And then you'd sit down, he'd pull out the bill. You'd be like, "Oh, this one's $14. We're $12 on that." You're just spouting out numbers, right? You're trying to do the math, 10 to 20%. And then at the bottom, you're like, "Hey, we did 5 examples right there. On average, we save you $3. So let's say you do 30 a week." And you write it down in big numbers like car dealership. You do 30 a week times 3. That's $90 a week. If you annualize that, that's going to be just under $5,000 a year that you're going to save by putting your stuff in a Airborne Express envelope as opposed to a FedEx envelope. So do you want that invoice coming here, or is there a PO box? And you start writing out the order. Yeah,
I think about Worldwide Express, it's like definitely selling small pack to start. But you also had United Shipping Solutions, Unishippers, and then you had Global Transit being a reseller license. That's where that would be to sell to franchises. But everybody knew the best trained and the best sales reps were at Worldwide Express.
100%. And we took pride in that, and we also had some probably unfair screening practices, like in hindsight. I remember when Glassdoor first came out, I had just popped into a market to help some new manager fast start his operation. And you do that and they're lining up, they're calling 4 recruiters. You got 14 interviews in 2 days. All you're doing is sitting in there just drilling youngsters. And, some guy would come in with a beard or a ponytail because his recruiter didn't say no facial hair, short hair only, full suit. Some guy would come in underdressed just by 1 little degree. And it was just a field day. Like we were coming up with stuff that we could say at the next trading to talk about how bad we dressed this kid down over his ponytail. And I remember just getting blasted on a Glassdoor review, but the guy called me the other manager's name. He did it on their office because I was out on the East Coast in their office. But those were things that like the intensity cuts both ways. It drove some really, really good behavior. And I know that the companies had to invest very heavily into, adjusting the culture as times have changed in our world.
What's funny is we're starting to get entrepreneurs on that have ponytails. Yeah, here in the lounge.
That's right. 100%. I mean, but everything's changed, right? I mean, when I was at Worldwide Express, like this beard wouldn't have flown. Like, no way. But now at Worldwide, like the kids don't wear full suits every day or either. It's like the whole world has changed.
Yeah. So you're at Worldwide for a while. Yeah. Then you became a part of Fusion. Was that ran by Joe Judson?
It was. And Joe Judson was the EVP of sales. He ran the basic sales program when I first got
That's a legend. Against Chance, we try to get every single human that we know directly trained at our
This was, that's, I think, why the brothers Leto and I hit it off so strongly. It's like I was one of the core kind of managers on this management advisory council that Joe formed that was voted on by our peers, but probably hand selected by Joe behind the scenes. But But he actually like created this culture whereby like the top producers, he would parachute us all into a market every 8 weeks. Every 8 weeks we were going into like get in a conference room, talk about some things, go have a crazy dinner that night, stay out all night, and then get out of town. But he did that to keep us there. He knew that we were all dead inside from running those franchises. I mean, we were 18-hour days a lot of days. We're in there early, we're staying late. Like building those numbers was like all that mattered to us. Like I didn't go to bachelor parties in my 20s. Are you kidding me? Like, no way. I was working. And I was happy to do it because they created that environment. And, we felt like we were making amazing money, but we were spending it, but we're putting on nice suits and getting in fancy cars. And that was all part of the culture. If you got a rep that got off to a fast start or he won the national sales contest, got one of those big funny checks, like your job was to get him to the dealership and get him underneath a lease payment. Like something else to go back out there. So, there was, going back to Joe Judson, in the early days of consolidation, Joe was the first guy to see, hey, these franchises are valued way, way under where they should be. And as PE started coming in and sniffing around, Joe was the first guy to say, whoa, let's start. He didn't even buy him up. His biggest, this was his coup, man. He got these owners to go into a cooperative. He put his Delray Beach franchise in with the original guy that I worked for, a guy named Paul Miller out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was just a sham of a human who had Madison, Wisconsin, Minneapolis. He sold the Sacramento one out to the guy that ended up going to work for it, the co-founder. But he got a guy named Arnie Klingenberg out of Philadelphia. He got some guys out of Bucks County. But he just consolidated down these franchisees. They put all of their businesses into a partnership. They gave Joe disproportionate equity, from what I understand, because he had the fastest growing franchise and he had the playbook and he was going to be the founder and CEO of the deal. So he took all of their businesses, consolidated them down. He was a master of talent. Like he knew he could see talent a mile away and he could get like results from people that nobody else could. Because he'd call you on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock to see how you're doing. Be like, hey, dude, I was just thinking about you. Let me bounce this off you. And he would engage you in a topic that was way above your pay grade. But he was just like getting you to think, and he was trying to mix it. And he'd probably do 30 of those things a week after a couple of Bud Lights at night, but like that's how he would keep us engaged. And so as Fusion came together, I was at a kind of a transition point in my life. I had been running all these franchises in the Bay Area. I'd earned a big equity stake. Private equity came in. There was a chance for me to walk away. And simultaneously, my wife had gotten pregnant with our first child. And we wanted to get back to San Diego, which is where we were from. We got in high school. We wanted to be around brothers and sisters. So I moved down I worked for Fusion for about 9 months. Kind of at that time, I was helping them out with the freight business they were just launching. And Joe had this idea that he wanted to sell other bundled solutions along with parcel shipping. And he was looking for anything B2B that he could resell. And we ended up doing a deal with a company called Trusted ID, which was one of the first LifeLock competitors. And he was trying to sell identity protection services as a benefit. So like walk in and pitch the business owner and go, hey, kid, how many employees you got? You're like, oh, I got about 8 running around here. Well, hey man, what would happen to your business if somebody's identity got stolen? I mean, that shuts them down for weeks. Like they can't come to work and they're trying to get their ID back, like their life back. Like for, $30 a month, you could cover that up and you get $1 million benefit. And so like as one of Joe's key guys, I was down kind of like hiding out in the Fusion office, trying to incubate this identity protection go-to-market thing. And after about a few months of that, I was like, dude, this is not going to sell like overnight shipping. Over here, we have existing budget, switch your service provider, easy peasy. Over here, you're like selling a concept. Yeah. And so, that was about the time when I started really looking around. LTL had really started taking off. Our best reps at Worldwide Express were crushing in the LTL. Yeah. And that's when I was like, this is my time. I got to get off on my own. And so originally I had a deal in principle to buy half of the Blue Grace franchise. And the guy I was buying it from had lost his biggest customer. He was like covering it up like pretty well. And so we finally figured out diligence, thank God. And I was able to get out of that deal. And then that's when I started talking to you.
Got it. Yeah. So WH was kind of founded out of the remnants of shipping solutions.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you and I met, and it was kind of a different thing. Instead of coming out as an agent, I think you white labeled or something under your own branding.
There was this really unique thing that Andrew Leto was trying to do at the time, where the agent model had some pretty bad stigmas against it back in those days. And I think it was just because there had never been a sophisticated, like professionalized agency approach in the past. And that's what Global Trends did, is they did eventually figure out you could come in to make a lot of money working from your kitchen table and managing your own book, and nobody will mess with you. And there's no upfront costs on like a franchise. There's no geographical restrictions on like a franchise. So right place, right time. They launched that model program. I was interested in doing something a little different. When I first left World Express, I wanted to start a software company. Like I was ready to do something in tech. I'd saved up a little bit of money. I had a small exit when PE came in. And so I thought like, okay, it'd be a good time to start a tech company. Well, I spent 6 months looking at the market, like meaning like Googling, like freight tech. And all you see was like, the Mercury Gate has a really badass TMS. I don't really know how to compete with that. I didn't know Brad was going to make Swan Leap. I didn't know Tim was going to make Ascend. Like, I didn't know that this whole category was going to expand. So I did what everybody else was doing at the time. I was like, screw it, I'll just start a brokerage. And so I started reselling LTL. And when I first started, man, I mean, you talk about like the evolution of technology. There was these little mini laptops. You remember those like little things like that big? And I remember like I had to go and take it to Verizon, get an air card put in it so that I could go out and do LTL quotes while I was out cold calling, because unlike parcel shipping, what I had come from, LTL, you had to have hands on keyboard, eyes on screen to be able to facilitate, your orders. And so my first, till I started getting to about 10 a day, I was cold calling in person. I was taking the loads, I was booking them myself, and I was doing it all through Global Trends' platform. But I wasn't really comfortable becoming an agent for Global Trends. I had this like idea in my mind that Worldwide Express, like where I'm coming from, is 10x better than these guys anyways. And at that time they were. And, looking at the agency model, I wasn't really comfortable like being 100% connected to like this other firm that wasn't even that big at the time. So you called me back one day. You're like, hey, what if like we got rid of the branding and you could just do your own brand? I was like, that's what I'm talking about. And then I don't know how they let me do it, but I did all my own AR and AP. So I'd collect from the customer and I would turn around and pay them. And it was a really neat way for us to get going. The business was called Virtue Logistics. We had our own logo. We used Global Trans Tech. It was hosted on virtuelogistics.com, but it was just an auto forward to Global Trans. And we had our own like logos on it, our own information on our bill of lading. And so it was a great way to get started. Economically, it's not really favorable for the agency because I was controlling, or for Global Trans because I was controlling the cash. So
it was super the market. We just wanted you and anybody else. We thought we could get into every other Joe Jetson sales trip ever. And you're right. When I made 2009, still in its infancy. I think 2011 we kind of had institutionalized like how to do it well on the agent side of things.
Yeah. So then, would you consider this really your first real step into the entrepreneur space when you started doing this?
No. I would say, building my first brokerage, the one that I started, with K-Fit, in 08, 09, that was, wife goes to work every day. I stay at home and ask myself the question, should I find a shipper or a job? Yeah. Like that's entrepreneurship. That's where you're like, oh shit, now I have to do it.
Yeah.
And I've had many of those moments in life where I say I'm going to do something and then you get enabled somehow. And now you're like, oh, okay, big boy.
Yeah.
So, bootstrapping that business was the best experience I could have had because I became a shipping hacker. If a shipper wanted to do international, I'd say send it over. And then I would blast it out to Pilot and all of the other local franchise air freight forwarders. About 2009, I started, because we had a website, Virtue Logistics, I could control all my own inbound and stuff. I started getting inbound traffic on my freight site, which I thought was crazy. A lot of it was for unpackaged freight, stuff like, I just sold this Sub-Zero refrigerator and I need to get it to Texas. Can you help out? I called a moving company. They want $20,000. What can you do? So that gave me the idea in Black Friday of 2010 to start like a pop-up package ship store. That business made more money in its third month than I was making in my brokerage business because of SEO. And there was a lot of people starting to sell unpackaged goods on marketplaces like eBay and Everything But the House and those types of resale sites. So I ended up scaling that next door to my freight brokerage business. I started Box Brothers of San Diego, and then I ended up scaling that to 4 locations with a centralized warehouse. So we had trucks and vans, and I was packing and shipping stuff all over the world. Ocean, air, like you name it. If it moved, I've either loaded the truck, driven the truck, packed it, shipped it. I received it. I've scoped it out. So through all of that, I realized that like when I got into venture-backed startups, when I became the first employee at Cargomatic, I realized between starting franchises at Worldwide Express and setting up the desks and hiring the people, putting in the computers, to starting my bootstrap companies and just being resourceful, like that made me deadly in startups because you could do a lot with a little bit. And it gave me a great network of people. And I think it also taught me how to explain things to, laymen. Like when you've got a 70-year-old woman crying in the package ship store in La Jolla, California, because her husband passed and she's got to get the house cleaned out because her kids are pressing her because they want to sell it because they get blocked dad's money. Like those are really difficult conversations with a ton of complex logistics needs, but it takes a lot of human empathy and there's a lot of money in those. So becoming that self-trained shipping hacker, I think set me up to do anything. And then as I was kind of going through those processes, that's when the ARAP thing and the cash flow constraints started to cause constraints in my life. When I had to sell my car, the story I told you guys earlier, sell my car to make a payroll one time, you lose a little credibility with your wife in those moments, and there's a little bit of a breach of trust on like, hey, you said you were going to provide for us. And so it wasn't difficult when I was able to sell those businesses in 2014. It wasn't difficult to go back and work for other people for the next 10 years because I had young kids at home and she was able to stay home with them. And I was able to continue to learn and grow in my career and tackle big problems and solve hard challenges. I just wasn't the founder CEO anymore. And so as the head of growth at Cargomatic and then ShipHawk and then co-founder at Airspace, I was able to serve that kind of first like revenue guy, jack of all trades role. And then that's really what kind of like catalyzed me to want to get back in the ring is ultimately disagreements over funding with the co-founder at Airspace.
I remember the first time I heard of Cargomatic. So I knew Brett Harker, one of the founders.
Yeah.
I was trying to sell my franchise at Blue Race Logistics when I was up in Tampa.
Yeah.
So I knew him for a couple of years. And I that Blue Race.
Yeah, I met through Global Trans.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because he had the shipping partner. He was a Global Trans agency.
Okay.
And that's how I know.
Oh, very cool. I just remember that after I left Blue Race, I moved back to Scottsdale, set up. I rented Carrier Direct, which is now Metaphora.
Yep.
I rented their conference room to start that business. And one day, these three guys come in, and I'm like, okay, so you got Jeb McCandless, you got Tommy Barnes, you got Ed Parker. Mm-hmm. And I think they've been out late all night. And right. Brett's doing stuff on the whiteboard, or Chet's doing stuff on the whiteboard. Tommy's sitting there, and then it's his turn. He gets up, and it was like a beautiful night. He went, oh, this is how you're going to market. This is where you're going to do this. You're going to be customers. You're going to connect. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, yeah, Cargomatic. And then you're the first employee over there.
Yeah. So Brett called me because I had the Worldwide Express background.
Yeah.
And first off, we both love Brett. He's a dear friend to both of us. But when Brett calls, like, you got to have some time. Like, it's not going to be a quick call. So, when Brett's calling, I'm sitting there going like, shit, I don't have any freight for him. Like, he was my warehouse guy, his father's business, Triangle up in Long Beach. Whenever I had somebody that needed, going back to my shipping hacker disposition, whenever somebody needed warehousing 3PL, I put their stuff in Brett's warehouse and I would manage the stuff. So he knew me as this like growth guy, like go-to-market guru. And he called me up one day and I threw him off and called me again. Finally catches me at like 6 o'clock on my office line one night. And he goes, hey man, have you heard of Uber? Well, subsequently, like 6 months before, I was thinking to myself, man, tech is coming into freight. Like, I need to kind of like digitize this. Like, I want to be a startup guy, not a freight guy. So I treated myself to go to a startup event up in San Francisco, like just the industry event about technology. And I thought, I'm just going to go learn, right? I'd never done anything like that, but it was free. So I go up there, saw some of my clients, and then I go to this event at the Moscone Center. And I see this huge crowd of people like who wait for a cab, right? Well, I'm like, 6'3", 300 pounds. So like, it was pretty easy for me to just kind of walk and stand in front of people. That was always my like go-to strategy on getting a cab. Well, I'm standing there and all of a sudden I see this kid just go like, and he runs out to this black car. I was like, holy shit, man, what was that? He was like, it's the Uber. Download the Uber app. And so I go home that night and I download it and a black car picks me up and takes me to dinner. And I'm like, who's supposed to think about it? Holy shit, this is going to change everything in freight. And then I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't know how to raise venture capital. I didn't know how to make a pitch deck. So on Saturdays and Sundays, I'd be in my office, like watching YouTube videos of Mark Andreessen pitching Stanford kids on how to raise venture. And in that process, Brett and Jonathan Kessler, the original founders, met up through Rachel So, who used to have a online, or she used to be like a reality TV star. They both knew this woman in LA. It was really random how they met. But then they made an app on the weekend and got it up and running, got it on a truck. And they're like, we need to go sell this. So Brett calls me and he's like, if you're at Uber, I was like, oh my God, I love Uber. He was like, well, I was like, I want to start Uber for trucking. He's like, well, we already made an app. I want to get you involved. So I drove to Long Beach the next day to Triangle. He demos the video for me, or the app for me. And I see it's all driving around. His driver, Moti, was out driving around. And I was like, dude, this is going to be huge. And he was like, yeah, we just need some sales now. Do you think you could help? I was like, yeah, like how would that work? He's like, let's start you off with like 90-day consulting and see how it goes. So I was like, all right, that sounds good. Send me paperwork. He's like, no, you should probably go meet my partner. I'm like, well, where is he? He's in Marina Del Rey. If you know where Long Beach is compared to Marina Del Rey in the middle of the day, it's like,
Good luck.
what?
Hours.
I'm like, so I'm driving like northwest right now only to go back to San Diego? Like, okay. And I drive over and it was like your typical startup situation. Jonathan was like this brilliant, like, you know, like kind of smaller engineer guy that's just this like hardcore smart Jewish guy that's just talking a million miles an hour. He's got a couple of like analysts, like really smart people like working on computers. I get to know them. Like one of them's a woman named Leora Simazar, who I still know. And she spent some time at, she's been at Fintech in a bunch of different places now. But she became like a product manager. She was fresh out of Harvard with like a computer science degree and stuff. And like, I'm like sitting there in this room of these really smart people. There's a bong on the table and they're just like mesmerized at everything I'm talking about when it comes to LTL and local truckload and cartage and all the use cases and the applications for this little platform and how I would scale the network and the shipper base at the same time. So they're like, this is it. Like, we need to do this, you know? And I'm telling them at those days, like, hey, there's only a few people doing online LTL. We could be the API that powers Global Trans and C.H. Robinson's local stuff. Nobody knows how to get local. And then Tommy came to Marina Del Rey a couple of weeks after that, and he brought Andres Katsoros. And I just talked to Andres a couple of weeks ago. And we started brainstorming how Cargomatic could become the Cargomatic that it is today, which is a local pickup and delivery service for a lot of the big LTL carriers. It's a local LTL provider for a lot of the big 3PLs. And then they do a ton of dedicated transportation. So I spent about 2 years there going from prototype to Series B. That's where I learned, you know, met a lot of investors, learned about building tech. And that's when I realized that, you know, this is where I want to be.
Yeah, go back to college. That's where you want to be.
That's right.
Before you want to be, and now you're finally kind of there.
I was getting there, and then I would say it was a really good opportunity because I still had my 2 logistics companies back in San Diego. My wife would become my partner at that time. So over those couple of years I spent with Cargomatic, you start to get the dissipation of your revenue and things that start to like slowly unwind. But it was also a great opportunity for me to like get out of those businesses and realize like I don't want to be in these businesses long term. They're an affliction at this point. Like, yes, it's a lifestyle. Yes, we're making money, but it's eroding the happiness in our lives. And it was very manual and we needed to see it go on. And so fortunately we were able to sell the pack and ship stores. They're still operational in San Diego. The guy that bought them still runs them. And then we sold our book business from our freight brokerage company. We sold that eventually to ShipHawk. And then that's where I became the head of growth at ShipHawk. And
I got to meet your wife. Though, because she took over this freight business.
That's
Two
right.
different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And stayed home to raise some boys.
2 dogs, 2 kids, 2 companies, and still loves me.
Yeah.
She's remarkable.
Well, you bring her out, we're going to go to Red Rocks.
No, she's you guys are really going to get along. She's a very, and she's deep in freight tech. Like, she's as nerdy as I am. So she's been on this journey with me, learning through osmosis. Every show, she gets the full download and debrief. She likes all my stuff on LinkedIn. So like, you know, Coleman, going back to your intro, very kind of you to say, but you know, I met you like I meet most of my friends. I meet you online. We engage. I start to see this is a cool guy. This is a smart guy. I think we probably got introduced through Trey, if I had to guess.
So yeah.
But, you know, great friend. Introduced me to a great friend. And I once had this guy that I played football with in high school that I ended up doing some work with later taught me a phrase, like, likes, like. So KJ and I like each other. Trey and I like each other. KJ likes you and Trey likes you.
Yeah.
Well, no shit, I don't like you. Like, we all like each other and we like the same things. So that's one thing I do love about our industry is it's inherently transportation's a network, right? You can't do it alone. And so when I go to Manifest or I go to TIA, to me, it's like a high school reunion. I'm seeing kids that I hired, they're not kids anymore, people that I hired at Worldwide Express, you know, that I run into. One of my favorite people to run into is a woman, Amy Conway, who's the VP of Sales at Uber Freight, formerly Amy Schmieder. I gave her first job as a key account manager right out of, like, she took an extended summer vacation and she worked at a bar in the Caribbean. And she came back and was trying to tell me that I was going to make her the best salesperson out there. I just ripped her a new one right in that interview. And she fought right back and she ended up getting the job. She worked away all the way at the Worldwide Express. Then I was at Uber Freight. It's like, I only see her at Manifest now. But I know I see her on Facebook at Manifest. And so I get to like check in with her about her boys and what they're up to. She knows about my kids. But that's the best part about being in this industry is like, it'll beat you down on any given day and it'll suck the soul out of you. But it's the people that could just kind of help you so like bounce right back.
Yeah. So you sold it to the Shiphawk.
I sold the brokerage to Shiphawk. I sold the pack and ship stores to just a normal individual. And then basically at that time, Shiphawk was an online marketplace where normal people could ship normal things. So we always used to joke we were the number one transporter of mattresses in America. Like we had one day where we shipped 18 mattresses where people would just go online. And Shipbox Tech was really cool. The founder there is a guy named Jeremy Bodenhammer. He owned a package ship store. So he and I were like these shipping cockroaches. And like, we actually met each other through, I one time through Sotheby's won a big contract for when Oprah sold her home in Montecito. I got the contract from San Diego. I would send up a 25-foot truck every day. And we would pack the stuff up and we would put it in a truck and bring it back to San Diego, route it, ship it out, like for people that want auction items. And we beat out his local package ship for that contract. So he would come get like onesie twosie items for people that hired him directly, but we got the Sotheby's deal. So that's kind of how we interacted is like, you know, we talked on the phone about that project. I think he picked up some of my stuff or I picked up some of his stuff. It was really, really confrontational. But then when I was at Cargomatic, he found out about Cargomatic and he came down and he wanted to explore an API integration because his vision was he kind of was trying to go Project 44 before Project 44. I remember when Jet told me about Project 44, I remember thinking that sounds a lot like Shiphawk, but it was on a way different scale because we were trying to just get a consolidated API for like shipping execution for anybody that had an API out there. And since Cargomatic had an API, Jeremy came down to Marina Del Rey. He and I met, discussed partnership. We like made that pack and ship store connection. And then I had already seen Shiphawk through AngelList because Shiphawk won TechCrunch Disrupt 2014, the Audience Choice Award. So Jeremy had this like super audacious pitch where he was saying how he had more data on what was in the back of the FedEx truck than what FedEx had. And like, he was like basically saying like, you know, you're just going to take a picture of something and then we're just going to like tell you how much it costs to ship it. It was like just wipe in those days. And then Devon Ramakant, the founder of AngelList, it just goes, he was one of the judges. He goes, it just seems like, why not just like take a picture and then like a TaskRabbit shows up and then like picks it up and like takes it and it's gone and it's just shipped. And a guy saw that video and he ended up saw that recommendation. He ended up raising like $15 million from like Tim Ferriss and a bunch of other people to build Ship, SHYP. Yeah. You remember that? Yeah. So it was right at that time when venture was just coming back after the Great Recession. And Jeremy had built this really cool database where you could go online and you could type in chair and it would pop up like wing chair, armchair, reclining chair, high chair. And then you would click on it. It would be like, do you have weights and dimensions? Which is always the hard part about shipping something for normal people is it's unpackaged and it doesn't have weights and dimensions. So you've got to add in accurate dimensions. You've got to add in pack dimensions. You've got to estimate the weight to produce a rate, right? So Jeremy had this database that like had some canned data on every item you could think of. And it would make these intelligent suggestions. So it was really cool for an online marketplace because in those days, UShip was like the only way to ship something big and oversized. And UShip had the show with the toothless redneck guys on it. So it's just a terrible stigma. And we had this professional solution where it's like, hey, you can get a quote, you get a pack, you could take it to a local package ship store, drop it off, and you've already paid us and we'll pay them and it's easy. Well, I thought that was pretty cool coming out of Cargomatic and like they wanted to buy my business and I was going to go run growth up there. And it was just up the road in Santa Barbara. My wife and I had 2 babies at the time. So I was like, oh, this is great. We'll go live in paradise. And the first year it was obvious that like that marketplace was like going to be tough to scale. B2C is just really difficult, B2B2C. So we started getting a lot of interest from those online marketplaces that I was telling you about that needed to ship unpackaged goods. So, you know, Sotheby's, I would do with the house, Art Deco. There was a bunch of them online at the time. So we went and got all of those guys to use our API and our transportation service providers to kind of move their auction goods. Yeah. But after a couple of years, it was obvious that like the marketplace element to that business, that the incremental revenue you make off the freight was not going to scale, and that it needed to be a software pure play. So when like the logistics left, I was obviously not the guy to like build an e-commerce TMS, and it was just a good time. We had like a year that we had to work there, committed, and I lasted kind of like another year, and then I knew it was kind of time to go back to San Diego. We were about to have our third son. My wife wanted to kind of get back home, so we got back to San Diego, and then I spent I got a job through Twitter. I spent like 1 year outside of logistics and events.com, which is a pure play SaaS company. I really fell in love with the SaaS business model when we pivoted ShipHawk and we got away from transactional and got into SaaS. At that time, like I started reading all the sales leadership books, and there was a lot of information out there about how to build SaaS teams. And so I got hired by this company that just raised a ton of money, and they wanted to build like an Eventbrite competitor. And I got in there in like my second week. The board came in unexpectedly during our leadership team meeting and removed all of the executives from the company except for myself and the CTO that had just got hired. So I reported to an interim CBO, and I found out quickly with a Google search that this guy had been locked up for insider trading in the Silicon Valley at like Seagate Technologies back in the day, where he was fudging the numbers as CFO. But he couldn't, so that meant—
Welcome to the team.
Well, that meant he couldn't be the CEO. Like, he couldn't be a director of a company that was governed by the SEC. So if you've raised money in a venture-backed company or PE-backed company, then you have some diligence that you have to conduct on your officers before they can, be a part of your company. So basically, this guy had relegated himself, like, where he couldn't go work at big companies, but he had lined himself up with all these like small investors in San Diego, and they would go buy distressed companies and they would turn around. So this guy knew every trick in the book. And once I got inside that business, I realized they'd raised a ton of money. They were spending a ton of money, but there was nobody paying for the platform. So that was a year of the most bloody business dealings you could ever imagine, where like every other payroll, like, we're either not going to make payroll or we're going to give everybody their checks at like 5:00 on Friday. And I was at this place in my career where it's like, dude, I just kind of got out of logistics. Like, I'm doing this other thing. This is super scary. I've got a wife at home with 3 kids. I told her, you're good. Like, I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to take jobs. Like, we're not like messing around anymore. You're going to be fine. So that year was really, really scary. And it was during that time, I got a call from Charlie Safro. And Uber had just bought Otto, and they were looking to launch Uber Freight. And they wanted me to come interview for the GM role. So I was like, oh shit, anything sounds better than this. This is pretty freaky, right? So I get on the first call, it went well. I get on the second call, it went really well. And then I find myself up in San Francisco with Lior and Anthony Wood Lewandowski, the founders. And we're like in the conference room in San Francisco in Barcadero and talking about what Uber Freight could look like.
Yeah.
And while I'm talking to them, I'm like, there's no way I'm getting this job. These guys are so smart. But I remember when they left the room, I'm like, I'm not getting this job. But like, the fact that I'm here, like, this is pretty cool. Like, I reframed the way I was thinking about myself. I was thinking like, I'm not a VP of sales for some struggling SaaS company. Like, I can get some shit done. So that's when I really got serious about trying to find my next project at Freight Tech. And as the universe happens, like, just like I did with Carbomatic, just like I did with ShipHawk, I get introduced through some investors to 2 founders with a great idea and no go-to-market. And I walked in the door at Airspace. They were burning several $100,000 a month pre-revenue. It was like Hunger Games. We had to fire like 14 unproductive salespeople that they had just hired. But having been through what I had just been through in the dumpster fire that was events.com in those days, I was prepared to do anything. I was bound to test it. And so we got that business right. And Airspace is a really neat experience. It was a time-critical logistics, it still is, and raised a bunch of money. It's a time-critical logistics platform for shipping like small items next flight out. So like human organs and rocket ship parts. Our customers were like, big medical groups and like SpaceX and Tesla. So if like you had a machine that was down and you have a high cost of downtime, you've got to get that part from wherever it is, and a human needs to go pick it up, take it on an airplane, get it on the airplane, and then you need to have another human waiting on the other end if you don't have a crew to take it all the way through. So we had a tech platform that would route those things in an instant and tell you the best airport to go to, the best flight based on all of these other characteristics. And that business scaled super quickly on partnerships. And I thought FedEx was going to buy us. We sent a cold email to Fred Smith about the business when we were raising money. And he invited us out. Like 2 weeks later, we're sitting with his son, Richard, in Memphis. And they just had like hearts in their eyes looking at us because we were doing this thing that they relied on heavily, that they were selling to their customers when we were doing it better. So I thought we could just keep it small, sell the business to them, put a notch in our belt, move on. My partners were pretty excited about raising venture at the time. And this is right when 2016, 17, when Flexport and Convoy were, Convoy were raising at SaaS multiples.
Yeah.
And I saw us getting stuck. I was like, if we raise this Series A at this multiple, FedEx will never buy us because the price would be way too high and we'll have missed this opportunity. And so that is when I decided to leave the venture-backed stuff and get back into the entrepreneurial arena.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, like, to hell with this, man, I'm a good operator. Like, I don't need to build new software to run a successful business. Like, I just need something that works. So I thought to myself, like, what if I could just buy an existing brokerage, put a little tech on top of it, a little lipstick on the pig, and then I go sell it to one of the tech-enabled guys because they can go raise money on it. If I build a $100 million business and I sell it to them, they could pay up because they're going to go get venture money on it. Yeah. So I called Dan at Convoy. I called Cargomatic. I called Load Smart. Like, I talked to everybody that Transfix. I talked to everybody that I could talk to about, like, hey, if I build a business, when do you guys think you'll get into acquisition mode? I talked to Worldwide Express, and so I kind of had the parameters, like, hey, if you get something that's about this size, like, you're good. So I found a 50-year-old brokerage in Omaha and got the price. It was priced right. Got the SBA, paperwork done, and went to close on the business. And then the SBA thing freaked out the seller, and then we went through it again, and then something else freaked out the seller, and then eventually I just called some investors, and we got some money, and we took out this business. And I moved my family from San Diego to Omaha in February of 19. Sold the business to a strategic buyer in October of 20. We had doubled the revenue. We stripped out all of the back office non-revenue producing people except for one. And we did it with all, like, mostly off the shelf technology. And so the operating ratios on that brokerage were among the best I've ever seen because the revenue per head was extremely, extremely high. And it was just a really special, neat business that I wanted to kind of hold on to for a long time. But during the pandemic, the rates spiked. There wasn't a bunch of businesses up for sale. The investors that I was working with on the project were in Southern California, and they were just quarantined inside for 2 years, hadn't had a haircut, and meanwhile I'm living like life is wide open out in Omaha, Nebraska, and freight is just taking off. But there are other businesses like restaurants and tanning salons were closing down. So like these investors were feeling this artificial pressure, and they were telling me, like, oh, you got to cut this person who's been at the business for 25 years. I'm like, her? We didn't get rid of her. Like, she got 60% of our revenue. What are we doing? So it ended up becoming like a difference of opinion, and I already had offers on the business. So it's like, okay, well, this is a good time to sell. And I worked for the acquirer for about 6 months, and Fitzmark is the company. A guy named Scott Fitzgerald is an amazing operator. I learned so much working with Scott. We raised a big private equity round right when in that 6 month time frame. But Scott is my age and worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You would never know it by talking to him, but his feet will never touch the ground. And I think working closely with him and realizing like what he had accomplished for himself really motivated me. I was like, Scott, I've got to keep going. I can't just watch you print money for the rest of my life. And so, that didn't last long. But fortunately, I went to work for a couple of big global logistics companies that really codified, this opportunity I'm working on at Upwell. And that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Yeah.
We'll rewind a little bit. So I think Airspace is Solana Beach there, Sandy Pearson.
Yeah, they're out of like Encinitas now.
Encinitas.
Yeah, they were in Carlsbad at the time.
So you, your wife, California kids, the boys were born in California, and you moved to Omaha.
That's right.
So we changed.
College World Series and Warren Buffett. That's all I knew about it.
I was gonna say, what drew you out there?
The business.
Yeah, that was
the numbers on the business. Like when you go to buy a business like through a broker. I don't know if you've ever gone through this process, but they make you sign an NDA. They give you like a little teaser. They make you sign the NDA. They send you over a packet that sells all this anonymous information. It won't tell you the city, won't tell you the name of the company. It says this Midwest truck brokerage does about this much revenue, has margins about this high. And everything I saw, like, dude, this thing looks nice. Like, what's wrong with it? And then you finally like get to the stage where you have a call, and I'm sitting there in Carlsbad, like sun's out in my office, everything's perfect. And I'm telling these guys, like, no, I want to move my family to the Midwest. This was during the first Trump election when Hillary was running. And I did not have a dog in that fight.
Yeah.
I was embarrassed that was like our choices in this country. And since I didn't have a Hillary sticker on my car, I felt like everybody thought I was something.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And I felt like, this is for the birds, man. There's got to be somewhere in America where people just let you be and you're not this polarized. And I felt pretty strongly that raising 3 sons in California and putting them in those public schools was probably not going to net me 3 strong young men. And I remember telling my wife when my first son started going to public school in San Diego, like, this isn't it. And we ended up putting our kids in private school. And by the 3rd month, like, I was putting out credit cards. So we got to get out of here, So when I found this business and they tell me it's in Omaha, in my head immediately, I'm like, Warren Buffett, College World Series. Check it out.
Yeah, we can do this.
Yeah. So I didn't even know Warner was there at the time. I had no idea. Like, I'd never been to Omaha. It was odd because, like, as a traveling sales guy, I'd been everywhere. But a lot of these flyover states I'd just never been to. So the next step was for us to go out and run some diligence. And it was about this time of year. It was May. It was like May 20th. It was, dude, that's crazy. It was May. Yeah, it's really insane. Yeah. So it was May 20th of 2018, I guess I went out there. And checked it out. I was like, all right, I can raise a family here. This is clean. It's nice. And then I brought the family back a couple of weeks later. And, people ask me, like, how do you get your wife to move from San Diego to Omaha? And the honest answer is you just hand her a Redfin and you say, just pay well.
Yeah.
Like, we're not wealthy. And like, but we felt a little wealthier than you told, for sure. And it's not a cheap place to live. It's a very tax heavy state. I personally live in a small town called Elkhorn, which is, can be like any of your other, suburb areas with nice schools and stuff. So it's not cheap to live there, but your money goes a lot farther. It's safe. And the kids adapted well. So we sold the business after 19 months. That first year we were there, this polar vortex came through where it just snowed and it was below zero for like 2 months. The whole state flooded. Nebraska and Iowa all flooded when the spring thaw happened. And my wife, like, we sold the business right after that. I thought for sure she's like, let's go check out the Carolinas. Like, maybe we should go to Tennessee. Because our families are all moved all over the place now. So we don't really have an anchor. And when I told her, like, hey, look, this deal's going through, we can go wherever you want. She's like, famously said, well, if you have to go, I understand. Just send money because we're happy here.
Damn.
And I was like, that's pretty messed up. I should probably figure out a way to make a living. And by that time, like, I'm looking at like, well, I don't know that Werner or UP has anything for me. I don't know that they're going to be looking for a guy with my skill set. So I was a little nervous, but while I was working at Fitzmark, after the sale of Manning's and just prior to the sale of Manning's, I was able to sell all of my shares in Airspace. So for a very short period of time in my life, I had a couple of extra bucks laying around. Was able to make some angel investments. And really the thesis on doing angel investing was a couple of things. You and I have a friend, Taylor Moss, that we know. Yeah. So Taylor was really the first entrepreneur that I ever mentored just for nothing. Like, while I was at Airspace, a lot of startups had approached me and asked me to help get involved or give them coaching or do some advisory work. But we had this kind of pact amongst our co-founders that we weren't going to get involved with anything else in logistics outside of Airspace. It's going to be our own portfolios. So when I left Airspace, then I started taking some advisory roles. I got the chance to start writing for Craig at Freight Waves. That got me a lot of inbound attention. And so I was getting a lot of opportunities to see deals. And then a lot of venture capitalists would start reaching out to me from my various stops and say, hey, we need to look at this deal or that deal. So I thought to myself, like, man, between Cargomatic, ShipHawk, and Airspace, I'm better at picking these things than most of the VCs are anyways. So I told my wife, like, I got my college paid for. I never went back to school and got an MBA. I'd essentially invested nothing into my own education. I want to take $100,000 and I want to put it in 10 startups and I want to track their progress and I want to see if I can outperform a VC. And then maybe after my next deal, I'll raise a small fund and I'll just invest for the last few years of my career or something like that. Well, then that got me addicted to it. And then, 10 turns into 36 and the 100K turns into, 400 something. And the next thing you know, I was really in that world. I was spending a lot of time talking to VCs. And that's how I ended up getting approached by the private equity group that I went to work for after Fitzmark. It's a group out of Europe called Man Capital. They own the second largest less than container load platform in the world called Vanguard Logistics. Mm-hmm. And that's where they were trying to automate the procurement of container shipping. And they wanted to embed finance products into it, like working capital solutions, so that an Amazon seller could get a loan to pay for the shipping, the cost of the goods in the container, the duty and tax, and cash flow them all the way until they get, paid.
Yeah.
And it was a really neat idea, but it put me in touch with like the big banks, JP Morgan, Cass, US Bank. And this private equity group obviously has these big global relationships. And so we get to hire people like the CEO of Cass, I could see over the end of the phone, was really interested in putting money to work in this supply chain. And they were looking for technology-based entry points. Like they have the money, but they can't underwrite because the data is so slow and opaque. So that really just stuck with me. And it started to shape a lot of my investment, like research and investigating that I was doing. So at that point, like even before that, I had made a pretty significant at that time investment into Basic Walk. And I invested into a fuel card platform called OnRamp. I invested into a company that was originally called FreightPay, then became called Current. Then they got acquired last year. But I was seeing a lot of stuff in freight finance, and I was really trying to kind of bridge that gap. Like, how do I get these big banks into one of these companies and do that? And then after about a year of being at the private equity group, I just got an offer that I couldn't refuse through an entrepreneur that I had been supporting in my network. He found out about this role that they were looking for somebody with supply chain expertise, CEO experience or founder experience, and VC or angel investing experience. And so I was intrigued, like, well, that sounds fun.
Yeah,
what is that?
Sounds kind of like me.
And they said, well, there's this project for the steamship line owned by CMA CGM Group. And they partner with all these big companies and startups to do kind of like a plug and play ventures for a captive audience of big companies. And so that's where I joined the steamship line. I had never gotten hired by a big company before. I didn't think there was any way I was going to make it through the interview process. And if it wasn't for this innovation job, I probably wouldn't have. But it was a great experience. I spent almost 2 years talking to some of the biggest logistics companies in North America about all of their problems. And then we get to bring in early stage technology solutions. And we were having a ton of success in, call it 2022, 2021, bringing in these early AI startups, non-LLM enabled startups that were like doing OCR data extraction and moving documents from one system to another, just basic stuff like point solutions. But these guys were like getting contracts from big companies through our accelerator, and then they're going out and raising the Series A. I'm like, it's kind of a shitty product and the founder's not that impressive. Like, surely there's got to be like something out there. So about 9 months in, it was obvious to me that like, I would say before I took the job, I told Katie, my wife, like, steamship, like innovation at a steamship line is an oxymoron. Like, this is not going to last. When container shipping prices go back down, this is all gone. So like, if I make it here 2 years, that'll be a win. And I was still thinking in the back of my head that I was going to end up in VC. So I thought to myself, like, this will be a great platform. I'll beat all the people that will invest into my fund, and I'll beat all the funds, and it'll be great. So while I was doing that, about 9 months in, I was realizing, like, man, at any time, somebody could just call me at any time of the day on Teams, and that ringtone from Teams would just give me panic attacks.
Burn in your brain.
And there'd be just some dude on the other end in a suit. So, Charlie, the chairman would like to know what you were doing. And I was like, oh my gosh. Really, the only way I survived at that company is like, that's why I started posting so shamelessly on LinkedIn. Like you guys see me all over LinkedIn. I post a selfie everywhere I go, because I realized like I would go 10 cities in 2 months in North America, meeting with partners, going to events, taking people out, showing up at conferences, and I would post at all of them. And then I'd end up over in France, or I'd end up in SIVA's headquarters in Houston or something, at a big function with all the other senior leaders. Yeah. And I got to be on the senior leadership team because I was running this business unit, but I wasn't like part of the operation. But people would come in and be like, Dehoney, you're killing it, man. I see you all over the place. Dude, you were just down with BNSF. How was that? What are we doing with them? And like, it was just these like pre-canned conversation starters that I was planting out there. And I would like realize to myself, like, this dude's all fired up about my LinkedIn post. He's never liked one post, but he's keeping tabs. Yeah, he's lurking tabs on me. So yeah, it was during that process, Coleman, that like that first year, I realized these people were signing up because they wanted these big companies want to sound cool. Project 44 was in the club. And that helped them get a big global contract with CMA, because basically it was this like innovation country club that I was running, where these big companies would pay and they would want to kind of look like they're testing out new startups and stuff like that. And they would do a little bit if the startup really nailed it. But really, they wanted to kind of get together and be like, hey, what are you guys working on? What are you guys working on? And so when we would come back to them with a report and be like, hey, here's your problem statements that we generated, they'd be like, that's cool. What'd you find out over at Ingram Barge? What are they working on? You know? So after the first year, and I had this fantastic dear friend that worked with me on that project, and she's been in the industry many years. I don't know if you know this word at all.
I was just going to ask you, I talked to her about her month and a half, but she got a new great gig.
Yeah, she's amazing. She deserves everything she's ever got. And I got in touch with her through kind of two people. One's Brad Hollister and John Larkin, both told me that I need to speak with Liz. And the very first time I spoke with her, I was about to get that Cbox project off the ground, and I was like, how much would it cost to hire you? She's like, I don't know for hire. I'm doing all this consulting. I was like, this company will pay. Like, let's put something together. Yeah. So Liz and I would fly around the country, and she has this just amazing way of getting people to open up, but she's got this big blue chip consulting background. So she knew how to run these really effective sessions that we get people to open up and tell us all their problems. And so at the end of that first year, Liz and I were compiling a report of the 141 problem statements that we had generated across like hundreds of hours of deep dives. And inside of these problem statements, they were all consolidated by area of the business. And this CFO area bucket just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, we look, there's like 14 problems in there, but not one has the same like thread to it. It was like, this is a problem with documents that you need for reconciliation. This is a problem for data migration. And this is a problem that like EDI is the only way to do it, but there's no way to, get around it. And so people were talking about like, the source of the problem was documents or payments or collections or credit cards. But I started looking at the problem and like, surely HubTran came out a while before this and completely revolutionized AP automation for trucking and freight. And I thought to myself, like, well, why isn't HubTran doing this? Triumph bought them out. Like, why aren't they doing all of this stuff? And I looked at it and was like, well, because they're a payments company. They want to push payments. They're not looking to get the broker paid. That's not part of what they do. They're not the broker's bank. They're the bank that pays the charge. And then I thought, that's really interesting, but surely somebody's got to be doing something. So I go to Gartner. I find this category that they had just named in 2022 called order to cash. And I find out about this company, High Radius of BillTrust at VersaPay. Yeah. And I go on like BillTrust website, and they have like a couple like loose references to like blue chip LTL companies that they're working with. But I'm like thinking to myself, like, High Radius can't come in and make autonomous finance for trucking. Like, no way. The billing requirements of the shippers are all complex and they're all different. And the dependencies on documents that are related to line item surcharges on those bills is going to make it way too opaque and messy for anybody to come in. So then I'm like, all right, God damn it, there's my next startup. Right,
I should probably do this.
So then I'm like, this is like August of 22 where I'm becoming convinced, like, okay, there's something here. Order to cash. High Radius for logistics. Like, that could be really big. And then it was like, but if I start to think about it, then I'm going to do it. And that's really risky. And I've told Katie Ellis I'm going to start more companies. And there's plenty of people I can go work for. And I don't need to start another company, but damn, it'd be really cool if I. And so then it's like, by September, I'm not like really sleeping. And there was 2 weeks where I was home. I've been on the road a lot for that job. And these 2 weeks in a row, I was home. And usually when I'm at home, I'll get up in the morning, I'll get some exercise, get the coffee going, get Katie kissed with good them. But like those mornings, I was just sitting out in my chair, drinking my coffee, staring outside. So like the third day, she's like, what's wrong? Like, you're not you right now. Like, I have this idea about this company and I think I should start it. She's like, what is it? And I told her, like, it's like this billing and collections thing. It's like, you got to generate the invoice in the perfect format, and then that unlocks the rest of the process, and it's all good from there. So I think that's a good idea. You should do it. And I was like, all right. And then like 2 days later, I had a basic block board meeting, and it was in Lincoln for a Husker game, and the board all flew in, and we had this fantastic session on Friday afternoon talking strategy. And then we're like walking out of there, and like out of the blue, I was like, hey guys, I think I'm going to start a new company. It's going to be a freight payments, but it's not competitive with Basic Block. it's going to sell software only, software automation of brokers and carriers. So don't know if you have any questions. And then they're like, we talk about, it's like, yeah, well, a lot of the automation that we built here at Basic Block, a lot of the back office stuff that you guys do to make your operation more efficient, more accurate, can be reused. And if you paired it with this rules engine that knew what every shipper needed to get paid, then you could use AI to audit a lot of these processes while they're in flight. You would know that the reference number was wrong on the load when it came in on the EDI, not after it got delivered, when you're trying to chase the money. Yeah. So I just started kind of just sharing the idea right then. And then that was October 1st of 2022. I called Aaron that month. I sent him a note, I think on October 8th. And I said, in true entrepreneurial fashion, that, hey man, I got an idea. I think I can line up some money. You want to start something? And then he wrote back like a true engineer fashion, like 1.5 days later. Interesting. Let's talk. But Aaron, my business partner, who besides Katie is becoming like just probably one of the most influential people in the history of my life, because he's such a badass and such a fun guy to build with.
Yeah.
But on my way out the door at ShipHawk, I remember telling him like, hey man, keep the phone close. Like when I start something, you're going to be the guy I call. And when I decided to start Upwell, there was 3 guys on the short list. He was number one because he had already built all these integrations for financial workflows in a TMS. So he knew the game. And he also owned a package ship store. He had bought Jeremy's old package ship store, the founder of ShipHawk. So Aaron was always running this little package ship store, which has this little element of freight brokerage where you're buying and selling transportation. So on the day that I happened to call him, he was doing his AP and he was struggling with 2 different LTL invoices. One carrier had just stopped taking credit card payments on their website. That really pissed him off. And the other carrier didn't send the supporting documents, so they couldn't prove it. So when I told him the problem, it landed with him right away. So luckily, his wife said he could start the company too. And we started originally. He was in Santa Barbara, and he moved his family to Omaha last summer.
It's awesome. That whole couple of years there is so fascinating from my lens, at least, because right, it's not necessarily I started 3 different companies, but you took over a company, you then sold it. You were also investing in a bunch of these startups. You worked for a company in ZBox where you're working with the largest providers that are out there, bringing in startups into the company. So you're getting exposure, really soup to nuts, anything within the supply chain space, and you start seeing this problem that everybody's having now leading you to Upwell. And I think it's just an interesting culmination of everything you've done up to your career up until that point, or at this point now, and just putting it all into one. And I think it's a problem that everybody has. Absolutely everybody in this space does. So it's an interesting problem to tackle. Now, I guess looking at it from that lens of working with venture capital firms, working with other startups, consulting them, what are some of the biggest things that you've taken, whether it's selling your car, one day to make payroll as you're going into Upwell and making sure it's like, hey, I need to make sure that I'm doing X, Y, and Z or avoiding A, B, C?
I think we've made plenty of mistakes along the way at Upwell. I think there's with everything moving as fast as it is with AI, it's very easy to over-index on one signal or another, and it's very easy to feel like you're further along than you are. So the false positives early on, I would say, you feel like you know what you're looking for, but I've gotten fooled on this journey. There's no doubt I haven't done everything perfect. I would say though that taking a more conservative approach, had I been able to go out and raise the money that we've raised and have the opportunities that we have and the access that we have earlier in my career, I probably would have, even more so than I have, like tried to do it all at once. But I would say one of the biggest learnings that I had from running the accelerator was too many startups take the advice too literally, because your VCs are going to tell you, go punch above your weight class, go shoot for the moon. And look, if you've got a shitty, immature product, showing it to a big, large corporate organization is the worst thing you could do. That's just going to put you in the icebox for 2 years. And I saw a lot of startups come in and try to recruit these big corporates into becoming their design partners. And like, nobody wants to sign up to be a guinea pig with their career on the line. Just like nobody's ever gotten fired from buying IBM. A lot of people have gotten fired for trusting startups.
Yeah.
So I think the real learning was going back to when I wanted to start a TMS. I knew like, this isn't going to be big enough. Like, I mean, unless I want to just bootstrap this thing and hold on to it forever. And I give Tim, but high marks. I mean, Tim has done an amazing job of building Ascend, and Brad Hollister, like, building Swan Leap, like, that bootstrap TMS, get it big. Like, John at Sunnybrook's doing it right now. He's doing an amazing job of building his TMS. But in those days, like, I didn't think that it could get big enough. I didn't think it was going to grow fast enough. I thought I was still kind of the early adopter of moving everything online, and that everybody else wasn't looking for cloud systems. And so a lot of times along the way in my career, I've popped my head up and be like, well, now is this my time? But I could never find a problem that I could build conviction around that was going to have a binary outcome. And I didn't want to just build a little lifestyle company. If I wanted to do that, I would just go start another brokerage or, operate, a landscape company or something like that that's going to cash flow. But for me, this is my identity. This is my shop. Like, this is me identifying a problem, picking a path, and telling people what I was going to do, and trying to leave something behind in the industry that is going to become core to the infrastructure, something that's going to be used like universally across modes, across organizations, something that is truly interoperable and can be open sourced for the good of the industry. And you have to be in a really big, painful, icky area to take a shot like that. But, the founders that have inspired me, that have created spaces within our space, are people that took that shot and that brought an idea forward that maybe some of us were thinking about, but most of the industry weren't. And, you look at what Jordan's done with Highway, like, you would have probably not said the industry needed another compliance platform when he came up with that. But he's absolutely created an entirely new space. And, between him and Genlog's, like, what's next, right? What are we going to be doing next? And so it's just an amazing time to be building. There's so many, like, founders out there that are just inspiring to be working alongside it. Having been through all of these different kind of iterations of my career, I'm just thankful to have the relationships, the network, the experience to be able to execute on this opportunity.
Well, the ability to keep learning, the wherewithal to keep going.
For sure.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable career.
Well, thank you, man. I mean, it's never once felt remarkable. It's always just been a grind, right? And so for a guy that has 7 exits, but it's always had to work the next day, I think this is why it was time for me to take a big swing. And I think the patience was worth it, and right when I sold Fitzmark, there was opportunities to get right back into, or when I sold to Fitzmark, there was opportunities to get right back into other things. And for me, it was a good time to just, like, pay attention to what was going on and get that 360 view. And then it's not until I zoomed out, I was spending time across all these different, asset classes in the space, until that's when you could see, like, oh shit, it's still all about getting paid by the shipper, and the shipper's not making it any easier.
We've been talking about that because it seems like everybody comes out with technology in our space and they want to start with brokers and then maybe fleets and then shippers. But it feels like shippers have all the money.
At the end of the day, they sign the check.
Yeah.
So, I think where shippers fit into our strategy today is there's another company that works in payment automation in our space called Loop. It raised tons of money. Matt's a great founder. Great premise. They started more on the broker carrier side, and they found oxygen at the shipper side because 70% of the bills that get paid in North America are paid by the payer. The other 30% bill through some audit platform or some payment provider. So that's a big green field over there. Yeah, 70% of all the shippers out there are still raw dogging it with checks and ACHs. So you start to think about bringing in technology on that side. There's a big opportunity over there. I tell you, we felt the pull at Manifest when 2 massive shippers approached my co-founder and I, and hey, become aware of what you're doing. How come this isn't available? I'm on the shipper side. And so for me, I think the utility to the shipper in our space is quality payment data. They just want a clean AP that flows into their payment processing system. It's an auto approval. First pass score is 100%, or first pass audit approval score is 100%. And it ACHs back out. They want no touch billing. And so how do you unlock that? Proper carrier documentation, proper data. So that's the problem we're solving today. How we can deliver that to shippers is something I'm really, really excited about exploring.
Yeah, Jason Boa introduced me to Matt McKinney a few years ago. And you hear about startups sometimes, and we're on the street. Right? I'm a recruiter, so I'm on LinkedIn. I talk to people for a living. And you feel like this company's going to die, or this startup's going to die, or one rail's not doing well, rest. And then all of a sudden, you wake up, and 18 months later, they raise $95 million. They get a deal with FedEx. So it's something just because you hear things are going on, that doesn't mean that entrepreneur and his team are not fighting, iterating, and keep going.
Well, look, if you've ever met Matt, like you know he's going to be successful.
Yeah.
I got to meet Matt during his pre-seed and the Series A, and first off, like it just shouldn't be fair that a guy should be that smart, that good looking. Like, it's incredible. Like when I'm around him or I'm around Jesse Buckingham from Puma, I'm like, no, how does this work, man? And Jesse's got the accent too.
Yeah.
Well, one thing on that too is he was a professional motocross rider, and I think he broke his back. And during the process in healing, taught himself how to code and computer science. Pretty wild.
He's an extremely resilient guy. We got to be on a panel together last year, and just the like 30 minutes we got to spend on stage talking, catching up. Like I learned more about freight payments from talking to him than you can in any other circumstance.
We're talking about skiing earlier. I definitely want to catch up with it.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt.
Well, I think that's something that's interesting that I just wanted to touch on too, especially because both of you were talking about it from Joe over at Fusion Logistics, right? And you were talking about how he brings out the best in people and the talent side of things. When you were talking about Upwell, you immediately said that like these three people are the first people that I'm bringing onto the team. What made you think of them, or what are you taking from that as you're looking to scale your team, or what you would recommend to really anybody?
Well, I would say that scaling the team is probably the biggest learning experience that since starting Upwell, because I'm a student of the game and because I see people run this playbook, I felt like, hey, if I can go grab people that are familiar with brokers that come from this trucking and broker world and they've got that Rolodex, then they can help me grow Upwell. And I would say in version 1.0 of building our go-to-market motion, I realized very quickly it takes a deeper level of intellect to have an order to cash discussion with a CFO as opposed to a TMS related conversation with the freight broker president of the company. Now, freight broker has his own EQ, his own set of intelligence. Like I would say I'm much more of a broker's broker than I am a CFO. I like to be at the front of the house. I like to be motivating the team. I like to be counting the orders. I like to be solving the problems, getting the shippers. That's why people start freight brokerages. They want to go chase the freight and fight the fires. They want to be the hero at the end of the day. But then the bill gets there and they're like, oh yeah, Debbie will do it. It'll deal, And then Debbie's like, wait a minute. This one AR has like 3 accounts payable moves on it. None of them are matching up. All of the totals are off. Who sold this load? Where's the email? And they're spending more time going back through the broker's emails and getting backup documentation and forensically walking through this transaction than they'll ever squeeze profit out of a $300 ripper.
Yeah.
So as you start to think about the DNA of people that start these companies, they're not the kind of people that are detail oriented and finance minded. Everybody's like me, and then they bring in the finance help later. Like if you ask Kevin Nolan about his journey of starting NTG, his business exploded when he brought in his good friend that comes from finance.
Yeah.
But everything up until then was really hard. So we brought in a lot of people in the go-to-market side in 2025 that have been successful in the industry, have gone back and found other spots since leaving Upwell and are finding success again in the industry. But it's not in order to cash. They're not talking to CFOs. They're not talking about AP and AR. And what I realized is that our company has changed since we started bringing in people from Bill Trust and from High Radius and people that we can fill in the gaps with our trucking and logistics knowledge because our platform is purpose built for it. If you don't know what a bill of lading is when you get to Upwell, it's okay because Upwell knows what it is. Yeah, I'll take care of you on that. So I think bringing in subject matter experts is something that I would have recommended to every startup when I was running the accelerator, when I was angel investing. And then when I started to build that first team, I went after the wrong subject matter expertise. It was more of the space than the problem and the workflow. So as we look to scale the team now, our entire our entire business has changed in the last 7 months. Our headcount is down 55% probably. And we're processing more volume, we're writing more code, we're making more sales calls. We're just doing them with fewer hands. And we've been at the absolute forefront of using AI in our product and our business from the early days. But the step change that happened about last October and then kind of happened again about 8 weeks ago, those 2 step changes have been just like fundamental, where like the next week you look at people's performance, you're like, this dude's on AI, this dude's not on AI.
Yeah.
And if you're not on AI right now, like it's a tough place. You can't hide at Upwell.
Yeah.
And so, we've been maniacal about using connected systems, partnering with vendors that have MCPs that are cloud friendly, building automations. I think almost everybody in our company has built a cloud skill that's being reused in the business now. So I think the next version of what Upwell looks like is more order to cash specialists across the business, and just super powered with AI. Just we do not say no to the tools. So if you've got an idea, if you need another laptop to run more agents, if you need a third Cloud Code account because you've exhausted your credits,
Yeah.
just let us know.
Yeah. I love that. Well, if there's anything else you want to add, I think that how we usually like to near the end of the conversation, throw it really to you for almost like an open mic, right? 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is. If throughout this conversation, if you feel like anybody that's listening didn't get the peek behind the curtain about you, about what you're building it up, well, some of the successes, the failures, anything else that you really feel like you want to hammer home, the floor is completely yours.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any inspiration you could say to maybe people that are looking to start a company, be first-time entrepreneurs as well, because you've been there, done that.
Yeah. I think one thing that's kind of like one theme that has come to my mind a couple of times since we've been talking today, and I think it's partially just because of the time in which we met and then all the times that we've reconnected at these various chapters. I keep thinking about, well, that was that chapter. You guys brought up some questions. I talked about worldwide in a level of depth that I haven't for a long, long time. Okay. And that was a very important chapter. And that chapter in my life keeps replaying and coming back with these relationships with the Amy Conways of Uber Freights and seeing her manifest and bumping into the guys that are still at Worldwide Express corporate at these various events. And then the chapter that came from Global Trans, one thing that you and I didn't talk about that kind of reconnected us was when I got back into the brokerage world. Exactly. When I got out of the venture-backed stuff, I mean, I hadn't been to there wasn't freight conferences before I did the venture-backed stuff, right? And then when Freight Waves came out, I went to Freight Waves Atlanta, and I was right for Craig at the time, and I was just really, really kind of connected in that ecosystem. And I just started seeing all these guys pop back up, like Travis, Ryan, holy shit, I hadn't seen you in a long time. Dan Bebout, man, where you been? And then next thing you know, it was like, oh man, I'm still in touch with all these guys. Like this group from that chapter has gone on to do some amazing things. And I think like one of the things about building a culture as intense as Worldwide or as intense as Global Trans is when you leave, you are not welcome anymore, and that was hard. When I left Worldwide, Judson wouldn't talk to me, right? He'll take my call any day of the week now, but like for about 6 years, I was on the outside looking in. And similarly, when I left Global Trans, like, Andrew Letterman and I didn't talk for 7 years, 8 years probably.
We kind of talk a little. Not really. I see him here and there.
Look, I'm friends with everybody, man. And if we spent time together, we cross paths, and you didn't do anything fundamentally wrong to me, like you're going to get a hug at the next conference.
What I will say is we're having a job. That was the most fun I ever had in my life. Those 4 years, because what Andrew did for me is he said, hey, I'm the bank. You have to take out all the money you want. Next time I see you, I better have a lot more than you took out. And just go. Just go. And that's what we did for all of us. Whether it was Lookout, Carson Holmquist, Dan Bebout, there's a lot of people over there. They've done a lot of cool things.
They have. And so the story for the audience is you and I reconnect, and I start thinking, man, there's something to this Global Trans Mafia thing, just like there was the PayPal Mafia. And so then I decided to write a story about that. And we got together at that conference. We took a big group picture. And I think that moment was a really cool moment of just standing there together and kind of just like looking around going like, we were kids then. we thought we were grown up, but we were kids. So I think where I'm going with this is like, don't waste a chapter. Like, don't waste, like, you're never stuck. The job you have right now should be the job that's getting you ready for the next one. And if you're not looking at it that way, like, you're screwing yourself. And I think that there's an opportunity now bigger than there's ever been for young people to come in and make an impact because of AI. Like, the future workforce, like if Upwell went away tomorrow and I, had a couple bucks and I needed to buy a job, I'd go buy another broker. I would bring in a smart kid who's AI forward, and I'd say, go to work. And I would just say, go find the problems, build the skill, integrate the systems. Because I'm seeing stuff now, people do things in our office that are blowing me away. I mean, I've been very complimentary of my wife, and she impresses me in so many different ways. I would have never called her technical until recently. Like, she's not non-technical.
Yeah.
But I would never have thought like she was going to be any better or sharper on the internet, or like outside of like Googling shit. Like, she's really good at that. She'll catch you like saying a misstat or something. But one day, at work, I'm just sitting there listening to her because her desk is right outside of mine, and I hear her asking for an API key, and then like, what are you doing? And I forgot what she was integrating. She was integrating HubSpot into something with the API, and she built an API integration with Claude. And I was like, no way. A few weeks before, we were entertaining quotes to get Upwell.com rebuilt because we were still just on some real weak templated website. And my wife, who was like a stellar designer, really good at making things beautiful, was like, just let me do it like with one of the engineers. I'm like, hell no. Like, that's the calling card death with startups, is when you're like, God, your engineer's coding our site, but absolutely not. It's like, well, maybe I could just, get an engineer off of Fiverr or something like that. It's okay, I'll let you build it if somebody else will get involved. Well, then like my partner comes in one day, he was like, hey man, there's a Claude skill for building these websites now. My wife jumps on it, and like within a few weeks, we have a brand new website. She did it all in-house, cost us nothing. I got a message on LinkedIn from the CRO of one of like the hottest, sexiest platforms in logistics tech right now. And the CRO asked me, hey, your website's fantastic. Can we get in touch with your designer? I was like, yeah, that's my wife. That's my girl right now.
Yeah.
But I think those are the things where it's like, she's got this talent that's been hidden and only used to like redecorate our house. But now she can like put it out front and center and make an asset that the business benefits from, that other people in the industry admire. And, that's where I think the future is going. And so I think these young people lean into it, lean into AI, make this that chapter that you separate yourself, because a 20-something-year-old could go in and make a lot of money right now, just dropping AI into the existing systems in a big company.
Yeah. I've learned a lot here today. I'll say one of my favorite parts I learned today is what a great husband you become. Thank you. What a great father you become. We didn't talk a lot about, you do a lot of travel baseball coaching, and you're a humble guy. He's like, along the way, you've always learned something. But there's been this theme of AR and finance all the way through the way. So congratulations on all your success thus far at Upwell.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for flying out here, and we're excited to chop it up with you for a little while. And every time we get to hang out with you, it's always
It's great, Cole. I go out of my way to see you, so I appreciate it. Anything I can do to support you guys, KJ, you supported me in a number of businesses. You helped a lot of those startups that I invested into build their teams. While you were hustling and building Project 44, you were still always kind enough to take a call. You were always kind enough to take a reference and help somebody out. And I think that's what makes you so magnetic in the industries. You are friend first, fee second. Yeah. We talked earlier about a friend that we have in common, Alma, on how, as soon as you realize that the guy needed something, you spit out every idea that you have in your head and make it available.
Actually, we can do his first cup games too. St. Amongst, It's cool, dude. Great.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlie. Appreciate it.